with oppressive security forces and a supreme leader. The truth is that increasingly the regime resembles a dictatorship more than a democracy. A second factor is that Iran has not always been front and center in America's strategic calculations. Over the past 3 decades, American administrations of both political parties have been more preoccupied with other foreign policy challenges. During the 1980s and 1990s, it was seen as a nuisance more than as a strategic threat to America's vital national security interests. It could be deterred and contained by a relatively small commitment of military means. This judgment started to change dramatically after 9/11, when Iran's nuclear ambitions came into greater focus and when the United States became more concerned over Iran's support for terrorism. Now, more recently, the Obama administration has come to office with a new idea and a new approach to Iran. President Obama believed he could succeed where others had failed and reset relations with the mullahs in Tehran. This belief was the fourth factor explaining U.S. policy. Specifically, President Obama thought he could negotiate an end to Iran's nuclear weapons program. This meant privileging good relations with the regime over supporting the democratic aspirations of the Iranian people. In other words, the Obama administration was reluctant to support the Iranian opposition for fear that it would irritate the regime and sink the nuclear talks. And the Iranian regime encouraged this thinking, warning diplomats not to meddle in domestic Iranian politics or else. As someone who has spent much of my career negotiating with bad actors from Northern Ireland to North Korea, I can assure you that empowering the Iranian opposition would increase our negotiating leverage, not decrease it. The record of U.S. diplomacy towards Iran over the past 30 years has not been very distinguished, but it is possible to learn from our previous mistakes. The past can inform U.S. policy going forward. What should the United States do now? Any U.S. policy needs to start with providing greater support for those brave opposition voices inside Iran calling for freedom and democracy. The Obama administration, all of us, should take encouragement from the events during the past few weeks and months across the Middle East. We have seen people who have been denied dignity rise up in Tunisia and Egypt and elsewhere to demand more representative government, more economic opportunity, and more transparency and accountability in their societies. These values are not Tunisian values, or Egyptian values, or even Arab values. They are universal values, and they are shared by the vast majority of people inside Iran. It is an uncomfortable fact that no one in the U.S. government or across the Arab world predicted what we have just seen occur across the region. No one. So although it may look like the regime in Tehran, with its repressive security forces, remains in firm control, we cannot be too sure, and neither can they. The recent events across the Middle East have demonstrated how poor we are at predicting popular uprisings. This means that the day when we see the end of the regime in Tehran may be closer than we realize. But as I said before, it is not enough to hope that this day will come. We need to work to hasten its arrival. So what can the United States do? First, the Obama administration should continue to tighten the economic noose around the regime and lobby other governments, especially in Europe, to do the same. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has stated that the sanctions are having an impact on Iran's economic behavior. Good. The administration needs to intensify its efforts. Second, the United States needs to separate its criticism of Iranian officials from the Iranian people. What I have in mind here is calibrating our official statements so that they do not inflame Iranian nationalism or allow Ahmadinejad to exploit those statements to solidify his own power. Efforts to expose corruption at the highest levels of the Iranian regime would be a good start. Third, the Obama administration needs to give its wholehearted support to the Iranian opposition. There is no reason for President Obama to be shy anymore about supporting the Iranian opposition. Finally, the United States needs to delist the MEK immediately. There is little time to spare. We all know that the people at Camp Ashraf are being harassed and psychologically intimidated daily. Just in the past few days, we've already heard and learned that the number of loudspeakers aimed at these poor people have increased. This situation will only get worse as the United States reduces its forces and prepares to leave Iraq at the end of this year. The time to help the suffering people at Camp Ashraf is now. The time to delist the MEK is now. Thank you very much.
Chère sœur, Madame la Présidente Mariam Rajavi, encore une fois, c'est pour moi un grand honneur de vous saluer parce que vous incarnez à la fois la résistance algérienne, la résistance iranienne, mais aussi, vous n'êtes pas loin de la résistance algérienne. Là où vous serez, mes amis, là où seront les militants, les sympathisants, les adhérents de la résistance iranienne, je serai. Je salue également nos amis qui viennent des États-Unis d'Amérique et bien sûr nos amis qui nous reçoivent ici en Allemagne. Ce n'est pas la première fois que je vois des représentants éminents de ces deux grandes nations pour lesquelles j'ai toujours nourri une sincère admiration. Mais ce qui me réconforte, c'est que chaque année qui passe, je les vois de plus en plus nombreux. Le nombre des anciens responsables ou actuels responsables occidentaux qui soutiennent la résistance iranienne se compte maintenant par milliers. Mais aussi, en parlant d'admiration, je voudrais ouvrir une petite parenthèse. Il se trouve que ce jour, le 19 mars 2011, coïncide avec une date historique dans mon pays, en Algérie, puisque c'était la fin de la guerre de libération nationale qui venait de se terminer le 19 mars et qui venait de coûter en 7 ans la vie à 1 million d'Algériens sur 8. Et ceci, Patrick Kennedy, je suis ému de vous voir ici. Parce que j'étais jeune étudiant quand j'ai vu, pas la télévision parce qu'elle n'était pas encore générale en Algérie, dans les actualités cinématographiques, cette fameuse image qui est passée dans l'histoire et cette fameuse phrase de John Fitzgerald Kennedy, « Ich bin ein Berliner ». La leçon que j'en ai tirée, moi, et c'est pour ça, elle va bien au-delà de la question des relations algéro-soviétiques, américano-soviétiques,